Hi there, Ronnie here, Amber's Night, coming at you with another video. I thought I'd throw my tuppence in on a debate that's happening amongst the RPG brigade at the moment regarding um, whether dice or character sheets are really necessary in a role-playing game, and also to touch upon a comment that's been made that if you don't have dice and character sheets, it ceases to be a role-playing game and is perhaps even dangerous. Um, I'll get to that. First of all, do you need a character sheet? I would say yes, because our games start from the point of view that as children we used to play role-playing games. We didn't use dice, we didn't use character sheets, we were cowboys and Indians, we were soldiers, we were cops and robbers, we were all kinds of different things. Uh, playing house, being mum and dad in a house. And we did this without any dice, any character sheets, any quanta. And that role playing was pure. It was really only restricted by the imagination that we had as children. However, we always had arguments, and we know the arguments. I shot you, no you didn't, it's just a flesh wound, blah blah blah. So we needed ways to quantify things, and this is where the rules come in. This is where character sheets come in. I personally think character sheets are necessary. Whether they have to be wonderfully complex and detailed, that's another matter. I think we can have fantastic games, wonderful games in fact, where there is no need for complex, detailed character sheets. The old red box D&D didn't have much in the way of complexity. Neither did a lot of the games from the early 80s. I think of the Great British role-playing game edition, which is Dragon Warriors, which had a very similar, very simple character sheet. Today you get games like Savage Worlds, which is very simple, Cinematic Unisystem, which is very simple. They're not complicated. On the other end of the scale, you get a lot of the D20 games. You get games like Pendragon, which is a very detailed character generation system. And I personally, as a GM, I find lots of interesting story hooks going through the background with a character as they're being created. But they're not absolutely necessary. A certain amount of quanta on a character sheet, you know, how strong you are, how smart you are, how much damage you can take. It just saves a lot of arguing that we used to have as children. So do we need character sheets? Yes. Whether you want a pretty simple character sheet or whether you want a very complex and detailed character sheet, that's all a matter of personal taste and how you view your game and what kind of level of complexity you want in it. But beyond that, you know, a character sheet, even if it's just a line that says you can do this, is perfectly fine. Do you need dice? Well, the evidence is categorically no. Whilst the overwhelming amount of role-playing games use dice, be it just d6s or d10s or d20 or a mix of polyhedral dice, there are games that use cards, be it playing cards such as Castle Wolfenstein or 54 Fantasy, or cards specifically designed for the game, such as Dragonlance 5th Age, and there was a Marvel superheroes game using the same engine, but it had its own cards. And they used cards as randomizers. But then beyond that, you have games like the Active Exploits rule system and Amber, which I think is slightly more, probably more famous, at least in name. And it didn't use any randomizer at all. In Active Exploits, you have a sort of pool of points that you can use to augment your own skills, and you just decide that you're going to use a skill and you're going to use so many of your points to augment it in order to succeed. In Amber, I believe you actually bid. I've never played it. I've seen the book, but I've never played it, so I don't know the system. But from what I understand, you kind of bid on things, which sounds kind of odd, but having not seen the system, it probably makes perfect sense in the game, the way it's done, so I'm not going to be critical. But clearly, you can have a role-playing game that doesn't use dice, or indeed any randomizer. It doesn't make those non-dice games any less role-playing games. There's just a different mechanic involved. Doesn't make them any less games. So I disagree with this notion that you have to have dice, or indeed any sort of randomizer, for it to be a role-playing game. As for this comment that if you take the dice and the character sheets away, you're no longer playing a game, I have to respectfully disagree. As I said at the start of this whole hobby, in a sense, comes from our love as children of role-playing. We gamed for hours playing cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, soldiers, whatever. We role-played. We weren't psychologically damaged by it. We weren't having an out-of-body experience where we actually believed we were the person we were playing, as has been put forward. I don't see the link. I think it's too big a step to say that no dice, no character sheet means you're walking into psychologically troubled waters. I don't get that. I simply, that's a, I'm not even sure it's a leap. I think it's too far a leap. There are far many steps in between. As I've mentioned, not all role-playing games use dice or randomizers. For those who don't, there are people who play live-action role-playing, which doesn't use randomizers of any description. There are those who channel their imagination into writing stories. They channel their imagination into drawings and other artwork. To automatically assume that A leads to Z, or Z if you're watching in America, seems too far a leap. It's missing out all those steps in between. Obviously, some people who are psychologically and emotionally predisposed can find themselves losing their grip on reality. But that's not because they've stopped using dice in a role-playing game. That's not because they've stopped using a character sheet in a role-playing game. To go back to my favourite game, and I know I'm going to start sounding like an advert, but I'll go for it. In Castle Falkenstein, you don't have a traditional character sheet. Your character sheet is a journal. I ended up coming up with a shorthand version of a character sheet which just had the basic skills and what levels they were and what suits controlled them, simply as a reference page for characters, so that they could quickly see where they were at in terms of their actual character. But it wasn't the actual character sheet. The character sheet was this long journal that you write. The idea being that when your character finally retires or dies, you will have a whole story. And there's nothing wrong with storyteller games. They are role-playing games. Again, it's about the nuance and the mechanic that is used, but it's still role-playing. I mean, as much as I'm disdainful of using miniatures in role-playing games, it's still role-playing. I just feel it detracts. Now, obviously, the person who feels that not having dice or a character sheet detracts from role-playing is entitled to their opinion, and I respect it. I just don't agree with it. I just can't see how you make that leap from one to the other. Certainly you have the right in your games to hold that view, to ensure that people have character sheets, to make sure that people have dice. And if I could make a final point before this video runs, I have no problem with iPads and the like being on table if they've got character sheets and notes on them. As others have mentioned, it's only a problem if people are being distracted by them. But that tends to be people who would be distracted by a dice rolling along the table. It's not a distraction in and of itself. It's only a distraction to those who are too easily distracted. So again, I respectfully disagree with the view that iPads and electronic devices on table are an automatic no-no. I think individual GMs can certainly say no. I personally don't have a problem with it. So those are my opinions. I just don't understand why certain things are being said. I think this hobby is bigger than dice, bigger than character sheets or the style of character sheets for that matter. And I think it's wrong seems the poor choice of words. It seems the idea that without those two components that you're suddenly not playing the game and you're starting to wade in psychologically dangerous waters doesn't hold for me. It doesn't hold true for me. I don't think it's accurate. So I won't say it's wrong so much as I think it's inaccurate. But yes, those are my opinions. And feel free to comment below. I'm sure some people may agree, others may disagree. You know, we're all human beings, we all have our opinions. So yes, please comment away and let me know what you think.